It was really important. They were Sean's heroes as a kid. Like he really loved the Von Erichs. And like the one thing Kevin said to Sean was like, all I care about is that the world knows that I love my brothers and we loved each other. And it wasn't, I mean, I think one of the characteristics of Sean's filmmaking, we talk about this a lot, is like we never want to judge anyone. And so if people are doing things, you want them to come by honestly and not have the movie tell you how to feel about it, which I think makes a more engaged experience for a viewer.
I'd been working on this script for a long time, and when that Dark Side of the Ring series came out, I was so excited because it was like someone else trying to access wrestling in this way that I hadn't seen, that I was also trying to do. So it just felt so exciting that people were starting to examine wrestling in this way that I was really interested in examining. One of the big struggles was just like how crazy their story is and how much you can actually fit in a movie.
Matt, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
We're doing so well. My name's Daniel.
I'm Anthony.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Anthony.
We're just so delighted to be talking with you today. We loved The Iron Claw. We truly loved it. And we've been itching to talk to you about it. We're so excited to talk to Sean about it. We're huge fans of wrestling, so being able to be in a world like that and see what you guys were able to pull off, it's one of our favorite films of the year, and we just wanted to congratulate you on it.
Thank you. I like it too. I'm glad you like it.
That's good. That's really important. And I think what's really cool for us is, you're re-teaming with Sean after The Nest, which is another film that we loved. How did you two meet, and how did your relationship evolve from that first film to The Iron Claw?
I was a big fan of Sean's, and we met through mutual friends, the composers Danny Bensi and Sondra Jurians. They scored this movie I edited called Enemy.
Oh, yeah.
And they had scored Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, Sean's first film. And I ended up through that connection cutting a movie called James White, and it was produced by Sean. It's part of their old company called Borderline Pictures, or Borderline Films. I can't remember. I think Borderline Films. So we got together, and after that he asked me to edit his next film, and that ended up, it was going to be a different project, and it ended up being The Nest, and we got close, and now we're doing it.
That's really, really cool. The Nest came out during a time where movies weren't being watched as frequent because it was during COVID. I remember watching, like, yeah, this is such a great film and so well edited, and I love the aesthetic to it, but like it just
it got a bum deal.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if like the Iron Claws sort of got more, I don't know. I hope people see The Nest. I love The Nest. Both of us were just like, man, that's such a fucking good movie.
It is. It's so good.
Now, what does your process look like with Sean? Are you editing as he's shooting? Is it like daily stuff, or is it something that you're waiting for principal photography?
No, we do. Like Sean and I, we kind of talk a lot before the movie starts and talk about references and stuff, and then I'm just kind of getting the dailies and cutting them. We don't work from an assembly, so it's really just for me to get to know the footage, and I sort of give feedback and talk to him throughout the shoot. And we talk about, like I do with any director, like what's really working and what's maybe like whatever. And then when we start, we just kind of sit down together and open the first bin and just sort of say, like, what do you think? And we cut it together, which is a really great way to work, because you kind of get through the first two cuts at once. It takes a little longer, but we're able to discover together rather than me say, well, I don't know if that worked, So it's a great way to do it.
I'm curious too, because with the Iron Claw, you're covering such a large time frame. How does that work for you guys? Like, are you ever there just like, man, like, okay, making sure the audience is staying track? Because like, again, we weren't lost, and I think that's a testament to like how well the story was told, is that you're seeing these years play in front of you. So how much thought are you guys going to that to make sure like the audience is staying, like keeping track of where time is progressing and things like that?
I mean, it was a trick. It's a trick with any movie that that like covers a lot of distance. And we had to work on it. As we were showing the film to people, we really had to look at like, okay, let's make sure people are tracking, because, they don't get that much older, but significant periods of time pass. So the trick was trying to make the time jumps feel like they really were expanding their worlds. And so, they are dating, they get married, they have a baby, and then they have 2 kids who are like 5, so you kind of have those markers, but it actually wasn't enough for people, and we ended up doing little things like we came up with this idea to have the match cards and some of the more wrestling centric graphics and stuff, and so we're like, okay, let's just throw the date of the match down there, things like that just sort of make you aware of time, because it is always really hard, and I think it helps the story if people are like, oh, it's been 5 years, okay, cool, so we were just kind of like trying to find any way without smashing you in the face to say time has passed.
Yeah, because it's so easy to get caught up in that world of like, okay, now I'm trying to keep track of too many dates and times, and you're not paying attention to the story and these characters. But you guys really found that balance with the Iron Claw, which is great.
I think you're right. I think that's right. You don't want to be thinking about it or wondering. It's the same as like if it's a period piece, you want people to know, okay, it's the 80s, because you don't want people like, why don't they have cell phones? Like you really want it to be clear.
For me and Daniel, we watched the Dark Side of the Ring episode that's based on Erich. So we were going through the checklist as the movie is progressing. Like, yep, that's like this is in real time what it was like to watch the documentary, but now in a more cinematic value. Did you watch that episode of the Dark Side of the Ring?
Yeah, Jason's a friend of mine who makes that. I did. I saw it. I thought it was so great, and we talked to Jason about this project, and it's like I love the Dark Side of the Ring. It's incredible. I'm just so happy. I'm so happy that wrestling is sort of kind of showing up again. I was such a big fan as a kid, and there's a great. Are you guys in Toronto? Where are you guys?
We're in Toronto.
We're in Toronto.
There was an amazing wrestling show called The Law that was on Fan 590 when I was a kid. It was like a podcast, and it was amazing. So there's all this great history there. I'm glad that.
Did you have a favorite wrestler growing up?
Who did I love? I liked all the freaks. Like I was really into like Doink the Clown and like the whole Degeneration X thing. I loved who were those guys with like they were called like I don't know, they had like the red and black shoulder pads.
Legion of Doom.
Legion of Doom I loved. And then when I was a kid, I was a Hogan fan, but then also because I'm from Winnipeg, so I got really into like Edge and Christian, and Chris Jericho. I love Chris Jericho.
It's so cool seeing, like you were saying, the wrestling coming back in this form, and I think the Iron Claw is going to really help put wrestling on that world stage, especially with the performances in this film. And I think that's something that a lot of people going into this film, what Anthony and I were talking about, who aren't familiar with the Von Erich family, this is going to be coming out obviously after the film releases. So when you do that cuts to Carrie, missing his foot and things like that, there's so many shock moments in this film, and it really is a tragic story of this Von Erich family. So I think what we were talking about was how it's so special that this film isn't like condemning the family or anything like that. It really is a celebration of who this family was.
Yeah, it was really important. They were Sean's heroes as a kid. Like he really loved the Von Erichs, and this is all over all the press, but like the one thing Kevin said to Sean was, I just want, all I care about is that the world knows that I love my brothers and we loved each other. And it wasn't, I think one of the characteristics of Sean's filmmaking, we talk about this a lot, is like we never want to judge anyone. And so if people are doing things, you want them to come by honestly and not have the movie tell you how to feel about it, which I think makes a more engaged experience for a viewer. And it was very important to us that all these guys were depicted really, really with care and respect. So I'm glad that you felt that way. But that's kind of the thing with the Nest and Martha too. It's like, you're not saying these are bad people, and I think it's a better way to depict bad things happening if you're not saying like, oh, look how sad. It's like, it's why the funerals aren't like doom fests and things like that. Like it's more about a fact and an experience rather than like a judgment or a celebration of loss or something.
And and earlier we were talking about you were talking about like showing time and putting the dates on screen and having those promos cut in. We loved how those promos were showcased in this film because they felt like such like moments. They were such like exclamation marks in the film, and we love that you guys made it look very like analog and through like the pixels of a TV. Was that something that was on the script side, or was that something they're like, let's show it this way when you were putting the film together?
It was something Sean and I came up with while we were shooting. The kernel of the idea came up, and we sort of said, there's a lot of wrestling, and the matches were all shot in their entirety. And so we started talking about like, how are we going to differentiate? And we're like, well, what if some of it happens on TV? And the movie was shot on 35 millimeter, and then we ended up doing this process where we reshot the promos on an old television, and used that. So it was it's like a TV from the era that I have these amazing friends who I worked with on my last film, White Noise, in Cleveland. And they have like this great rig where they shoot, they developed it for White Noise, where they shot the television. And so when we brought it into the DI with like the finished visual effects and everything, what you're looking at is a real television and real pixels, which I think you can't fake with visual effects.
That's so cool.
It looks unreal,
Yeah, it looked, they were some of the highlights of the film for us outside of the actual wrestling itself, which was pretty phenomenal.
I'm so glad. Those are our favorite things.
It's because it really puts it back into that era, right? Like that 80s era of that wrestling. And when you think of it, you think of star wipes, you think of the cross wipes, and the way you just described how you captured it. It's pretty amazing that that we could do that now. Like it's super cool.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it. We also did we didn't use the real WCCW intro on the TV, but we kind of collected a bunch of them and had these guys in LA called Filmograph. This guy Aaron, who just like, he helped us make this amazing, totally authentic feeling opening with our characters in the TV. It's like, I'm glad you're picking out the details, because you put a lot of work into them. Like a lot of work goes into that, and a lot of thought. And I think it does count, like I think it adds up to something that feels a little bit more authentic.
It does. And I think you guys leave it all on the screen in this one, because it really does feel so authentic, so real. It feels like you're watching a film of that time, and it really is special. It really is special what you guys have put together.
Thanks, guys. I'm so happy.
Now, another authentic part that we notice is the wrestling, and the way the wrestling's edited in the ring. It really felt like this is something I would have watched on TV. Was that something that you kind of went back to and looked at old videotapes of how they captured it, how they would cut to a hit or a bump or the fans' reaction? Because it felt like I was there. I was in that era with those people in the crowd.
I have to say, I think it like must just be in my DNA, but I watched a bunch of wrestling. I can't say that I was matching for it. I really was just trying to make it feel great. What we did do, I think, is that we changed the way the wrestling was presented, mostly in the photography, where it starts out like quite wide, observational, and then as we go to ESPN, it's more in the ring, and we changed the sound mix to be more in the sort of TV world. And then later it becomes more internal, like the Ric Flair fight, and that stuff feels really sort of heavy and personal. So a lot of that stuff was story like focused, trying to make it feel like time was passing with the way we were presenting it. There was a decision they made to not use any video cameras, which I am so glad we didn't do, because I think it really would have brought up a lot of stuff, like, oh, is that video too clean? I think we'd get in our heads about it. So we wanted to just do it in the one format and then try to do the rest with feel and vibe and like style. So it was amazing to start watching wrestling again, but old wrestling was very different the way that they recorded it, and the new wrestling, which is what the Von Erichs sort of invented, was this more visceral, closer style. We just kind of went for it.
It looked very, very cool. As we're closing up, we wanted to ask you, were there any films that you looked at in preparation for this one, outside the world of wrestling? Were you looking at any films that you, or just the look of these films, you're like, what, I want to try and either get inspiration from this or emulate something like this for the Iron Claw?
Yeah, there were definitely. I mean, I watched almost every boxing movie I could. I don't think it's original to say Raging Bull, but I definitely looked at Raging Bull for this movie because of the time passage and the way that was handled. And the other one was The Godfather. The Godfather was a big one for us because there's this sort of like central character in the background always watching. Those were a couple, and then Deer Hunter was another big reference for us, that sort of we wanted to do this epic story of brotherhood and togetherness and the connection that spans a lifetime. So I would say those are the top three, plus like Criterion had a wrestling collection. I just ate it up, like I watched everything.
There's the scene where we see them watching like the Japan fights, and then it cuts back to the living room, and you see the staircase. It really is such a like that. I think that gave us chills when we were watching that. So there's so much that we love in this film, and we're just so grateful that we were able to talk to you about it. I really hope we get to talk to you for your next project, because this is special. We're so excited for everyone to watch it.
Call me anytime, guys.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks. Later.
Sean, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
We're doing so well. I'm just got to tell you, we love The Iron Claw so much. It truly blew us away this year. It's one of our favorite films, and we're just counting down the days until we could go see it again in the theater. So thank you so much for this one.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
What was it about the Von Erichs that made you want to tell their story?
I really loved them when I was a kid. I was living in England, and it was the late 80s, so the heyday of the Sportatorium and WCCW had passed, but I was really into wrestling and wrestling history, and eventually came across them on some old tapes and magazines, and just loved WCCW, loved the way it looked, loved them. They were just rock stars in this way that I don't know. It was just I felt like close to it. It felt different. It felt energized in this way that it was like my dream wrestling. So that was the base. And then I got to see Kerry live a bunch of times in WWF in the early 90s. And so I think that solidified that love for them. And then when he died, it really haunted me. I remember where I was when I found out. I knew that other brothers had died. So I connected to them, and just, they stayed with me.
It's so surprising because we learned about this story recently because we watched one of the episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, which talked about the Von Erichs. And I came at the end of that era of the Texas tornado. I didn't know this history with the family. So when we watched that episode, it was really, really shocking to see like this whole family and the tragedy they went through.
Yeah, it's stranger than fiction stuff. It's just the amount of tragedy too, and the amount that's not in the movie. And it was amazing, like that. I'd been working on this script for a long time, and when that Dark Side of the Ring series came out, I was so excited because it was like another, someone else trying to access wrestling in this way that I hadn't seen, that I was also trying to do. So it just felt so exciting that people were starting to examine wrestling in this way that I was really interested in examining. And so one of the big struggles was just like how crazy their story is and how much you can actually fit in a movie.
Yeah, and there's a lot to fit in this film, and I think something that Anthony and I and our co-host Shay always spoke about when we were talking about the film recently was that it never feels like you are like condemning the family. This is a celebration of who they were, and I think that's so important, and that shines through your direction and the story that the Iron Claw is, right? I think I'm curious for you, was that ever a balance for you tone-wise when you were working on the script, where you're feeling like, am I, leaning too much into the hardships and why this, like, what happened is bad, or am I celebrating them more? Like, what was that like for you, balancing that?
Constant balancing act of wanting to look at as much as I could without overpacking it. Like there's so many stories and storylines that didn't make it into the film that I not only wrote but visualized, and like wanted to explore. But at the end, like it was just a series of decisions about how to focus it, how to make it an actual movie. So it's that constant balance through the edit of like where are we going to, where is it too much? Where is it not enough? Where is it, do we need more celebration? Do we need more emotion? It's a constant balancing act.
What we love so much when that picture dropped of Zac Efron and Harris Dickinson and Jeremy Allen White, with their backs turned, and we just knew, we're like, okay, this Sean has it. He's got it. You have an incredible cast in the Iron Claw. What was it about that trio and just the family in general that you're like, these are the Von Erichs. They need to be my Von Erichs, and we'd love for you to talk about them.
Well, I'm fans of all those guys. Actually, this entire cast, with the exception of Stanley, who was a discovery from casting, but everybody else, from Maura and Lily, Zach, Jeremy, Harris, Holt, like, I've been fans of theirs. So it was sort of this dream cast to put together. And I think what I looked for was just starting with Zach, looking for I knew he had the physicality. I knew he's the performer that he is. I'm a huge fan of his. I've always wondered what he'd feel like in one of my worlds. But the core to Kevin is this kindness. Mm-hmm. And it's a very quiet kindness. So I don't think it's one that can be performed. It has to be there. You have to feel it. And I felt it from meeting him. And so he that was sort of my way in with him. And Jeremy, I've known forever. We worked together a long time ago. And for him, it was the intensity of Carrie and that sort of inner turmoil of Carrie. And then Harris just has an ease about him, and David just had this ease. Everything, and Kevin says it, like, everything was easy to David. He didn't need to work as hard as the other guys worked really hard. David was like, yeah, whatever, and he was like the most naturally talented. And Harris has a bit of that energy, and so it was just trying to, like, starting as being fans of theirs, and that together they look great, and then the silhouette being right. Like, David was the tallest, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
and obviously Carrie is like, there are very few humans on Earth the size of Carrie, never mind acting. So making sure, and sort of leaning into the sort of earlier days of the family, where Carrie wasn't that large, and making that the silhouette so that as a trio, they really looked like them without getting too obsessive with, like, making them look too closely like them.
Definitely. Now, you were really the first director to capture Ric Flair on the big screen. What was it like to recreate those iconic moments in the ring, as well as those iconic promos that you see Ric Flair and wherever you see his videos on YouTube or TikTok? What was it like to just, like, recreate those things again?
I'm not sure I've ever had so much fun as that. Aaron D. Eisenberg, who plays Ric Flair, I worked with him. I'd worked with him like a year earlier on a TV show. He came in and did an episode for me, and I'd been a fan of his, and he came and did this episode, and he was just like, played this kind of guy with like a bit of a screw loose, kind of like just unpredictable. And then I was in prep for this, and I was like, oh, Aaron should do Ric Flair. So I called him, and I was like, yeah, will you it's only a day, or a day and a half, and we'll take some prep, but will you do it? And he's like, sure. Yeah, well, what is it? I was like, Ric Flair? He's like, yes, I'll play Ric Flair. Are you kidding me? And so we started together, actually, like, building out the promo. Like, we really worked on that together, like, and sort of taking these, like, best bits and, like, finding the themes, because it was really important to me, the movie as a whole, and it's really represented in those Ric Flair sections of, like, they're about very clear themes, and wrestling allows you to say those themes, but to do it both in a serious way. Like, Ric Flair says the most concise, meaningful thing about masculinity in the whole film, and he's just doing it in this absurd way. And I think that really captures wrestling, right? Like, wrestling, for all its extremes, like, hits at truths that audiences relate to, and it's why audiences are so emotional and passionate about the wrestlers they love, because something truthful hits them. And so playing with that with Ric Flair, especially where it comes in the film, where it's like Kevin's lowest low point, and just to have that lift was just really exciting.
Yeah. We were speaking with your editor Matt about how you recreated those, and you shot those on real TVs, authentic to the time, which is absolutely incredible, and something we're gonna look for next time we watch it. But really quickly, Sean, as we wrap up, we're so grateful for you sharing your time. We just have to ask you, Bret Hart introduced the Iron Claw in Calgary at a recent screening. What does that mean to you as a fan of wrestling growing up and seeing someone from that world introducing a film that you're making? And would you ever consider, telling the Hart family story one day too?
Well, I didn't know that happened, so thanks for telling me. But Bret Hart is my all-time favorite wrestler. He's my number one. So that means a lot. I love that family too. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule anything out. I mean, I actually got asked this in a Q&A last night, and I can't, it's been a huge undertaking to get into the wrestling world and to portray it. I often thought like, yeah, that would be it. I can't imagine doing it again, but I don't know if I could fully say that. It's certainly not. I would not say it's fully out of my system.
You got you. Sean, thank you so much for your time again. We absolutely adore this film. We cannot wait to watch it again. We hope we get to talk to you again, and we wish you happy holidays, happy New Year to you and your family.
Thanks, guys.